Mom abandoned me with abusive dad, but now she turns up years later and asks for one last chance to explain everything, so I let her, and then she showed me the picture of my real dad apostrophe. Oh boy. I, 18 male, have been raised by my dad, and about 6 months ago, he passed away in an accident. My parents separated when I was 5 years old, and my mom did not keep in touch with us after that. So I have very little memory of what kind of relationship I had with my mom. All I know is that my dad did not like my mom, and he took it out on me because throughout my life, he was literally the most unkind, horrible person to live with. He was downright abusive, if I'm being honest. I would get smacked for every small mistake that I made, and he would lose his temper with me over the slightest matters, and overall, I had learned to walk on eggshells around him. So when he passed away, I had mixed feelings about the whole thing because on one hand, of course, he had raised me and we had some good days when he wasn't acting psychotic. But for the most part, I was just relieved. But after that, I started feeling extremely lonely because for a couple of weeks my relatives did keep in touch with me and check up on me occasionally, but then they kinda got busy with their own lives. It's not shocking my dad wasn't particularly close to anybody, and as a result of that, even I wasn't that close to anybody else in the family. My grandparents moved away 5 years ago and I don't have a lot of friends. The ones that I do aren't even here right now because they're in college and I'm taking a gap year. So for the past couple of months, I've been very lonely and kind of depressed as well because I feel like there's nobody to care for me. It's not a new feeling by any means. I used to feel like that all the time even before my dad passed away because of the way that he was constantly angry and hateful. But then after he passed away, I started feeling like I was completely alone, and I don't know, I can't explain it, but honestly it felt like the most horrible feeling in the world. Because of all this, I guess I agreed to meet my mom when she reached out to me a couple of days ago. I know that she had abandoned me when I was very young. She had had an affair and eloped with some guy, and then she had declined to accept shared custody even though my dad had been open to it after everything that had happened. I know all this is because my dad used to bring it up at the drop of a hat to taunt me about these things as if it was my fault. It was his way of trying to make me feel bad for myself and remind me exactly how unwanted I really was when he felt particularly mean-hearted. I've never said it out loud because I don't want to make it seem like I am defending my dad, but honestly, I used to think that a huge part of the reason my dad turned out to be such a horrible person was because of what my mom had done. I'm not implying that being cheated on and left behind gave him the license to behave the way that he did, but I'm just saying, it's actually at least an explanation for his awful behavior. I had no idea why my mom left me though, since I didn't have any contact with her side of the family after she cut ties with us. So more than anything else, I just needed answers. And I agreed to meet her a couple of days ago when she reached out to me through an email. She said, "I'm really sorry for your loss. I know it can't have been easy spending your life with your dad, and I know that you're probably very upset with me because I haven't been there for you. But I hope that you give me a chance to explain myself and meet me at least once. You might find this message very upsetting because you probably don't even want to think about me because of everything that I have done, and I don't blame you for that, but just let me explain myself at least one time. Love, your mother." I didn't really want to speak to anybody from the family about it, so I decided to consult a couple of my friends, and they told me to go for it because if I didn't, I would probably keep thinking about it. So just so that I don't end up regretting passing up this opportunity in the future, I decided to write back and told her I was ready to meet her, and within a few days, she showed up at my house. It was very awkward at first since I hadn't seen this woman for almost 13 years, and I felt like I had to be a little more formal. But within a couple of minutes of making small talk, she started hugging me and crying and told me that she had thought about this meeting every single day ever since she left, and she had never stopped regretting her decision of letting me go. I don't know how to feel. I had no idea what she was talking about, so I decided to just cut to the chase instead of indulging in the whole act. And I just asked her why she had left me in the first place. And then slowly she started telling me everything, and basically my father had filed for a divorce when he had found out that my mother had been having an affair, and apparently I wasn't even his biological child. After explaining that whole thing to me, she showed me a picture of my biological father, and it just so happens to be my dad's paternal cousin. Basically, she got married to my dad just because she was pregnant with me, and there was a lot of pressure on both of them from their respective families to get married because of the pregnancy. They gave in to the pressure, and after dating for just 1 year, they got married when my mom was 12 weeks along. Unfortunately, both of them were really young. They didn't know what they wanted from their lives, and on top of that, my dad was still struggling to find his footing in the work arena. My mom had to quit her job to look after me at home, so none of them were happy about how things turned out. On top of that, my dad apparently already had a temper problem, and that used to flare up quite frequently after they got married and had me. And because of the constant fights and silent treatment, my mom ended up starting an affair with his cousin. That was a huge sore spot for him because as it is, my dad used to compete with his cousin in pretty much everything, and I know for a fact that he was very bitter about him for some reason. although I didn't know what that reason was until recently. I knew that my grandfather was very close to his brother, but for some reason I never got to see them after my parents' divorce, and neither did I get to see my uncle. It's just that I was too young to connect the dots, and very honestly it hadn't even occurred to me in all these years that I might not have been my father's biological son. Of course I did think that my mom might have had an affair with my dad's cousin, and that's why he cut my uncle and that part of the family out of our lives completely. But not even for a second did I think that I was not my father's biological son, because it was simply absurd. So finding out about that from my mom was a shock in itself. And then she even went on to tell me that when my dad found out about the divorce, he basically just used me as a weapon. Apparently, she had been forced to abandon me against her will because my dad and my grandparents, along with their lawyers, painted her out to be some immoral villain with a terrible influence on my life. When they found out about the affair, they went all out and somehow proved her to be mentally unstable and alcoholic, and even claimed that she had minor addictions and was an overspender. They made her out to be an incompetent mother, and although she tried her best with her minimal resources, she couldn't fight against my dad and his sharks. By the time they got divorced, my dad was doing pretty well in his career and my grandparents have always been well off, so it's not a surprise that they were able to fight their case so well back then. Long story short, my dad built such a strong case against her in family court that she not only lost custody of me, but she didn't even get supervised visitations, and she was advised to stay away from me until she got better. So even when I got a little older, she thought about contacting me but decided against it because she knew that my dad wouldn't like it and she didn't want to get into legal trouble with him. She told me that over the years, she has tried to contest his arrangement several times, but has always fallen short, either because of her legal counsel or because of money, and because, of course, lawyers are pretty expensive, and good lawyers on top of that are even more expensive. And I'm like my dad. My mom wasn't exactly some rich exec. She's a store manager and can't afford to throw away money like he can. So that's why after her last failed attempt to contest the arrangements almost 4 years ago, she decided to wait it out until I was 18, and she told me that it was the hardest thing that she had done. And now it's up to me whether I want to accept her as my parent or not. He was a huge shock to me, so I asked for some time to process things and she left and told me that she would wait. Afterwards, I decided to call my grandparents and tell them about it because obviously they had known about all these things right from the beginning but had never told me about it. They had always painted my mom to be some kind of villain, and my dad, in spite of having his anger issues, was still a good guy deep down. And after the divorce, that's how I had believed things to be. 5 years ago, my grandparents decided to move away to help my grandma's family with the farm, and since then they've been staying there, so I haven't had a lot of contact with them. I did see them at the funeral recently, but then they flew back home the next day, and I found it a bit weird because even though we haven't been very close recently, I used to spend a lot of time with them when I was little. So I figured that at least now they would try to be there for me or something. So I was kind of upset with them. Finding out about these things from my mom made me even more upset. And when they answered my call, I confronted them pretty rudely, and they were kind of taken aback. I told them about my mom's visit and told them everything that she had said and demanded an explanation from them. And to my surprise, they did not even deny anything. They couldn't deny the whole thing about my dad not being my biological father anyway, because my mom had the results of a paternity test conducted several years ago as proof. But even the rest of it, the fact that my dad and his dangerous team of lawyers had prevented my mom from even contacting me out of fear and had made sure that she stayed away from me, they accepted that as well. They were not apologetic about it in the slightest. They just told me that my dad did whatever he thought was appropriate to protect me, and it was silly of me to expect them to be sorry about it or act like they did something wrong. Both of them tried to justify my dad's actions really hard, and told me that at the end of the day, my father had given me a good life and made sure that I had everything that I would ever need, something that my mom wouldn't have been able to do on her own. So I should be grateful to my father instead of questioning his motives and intentions, because ultimately, he always had my best interests at heart, and that's why he made sure that my mom stayed away. And apparently it's insulting to his memory for me to even imply that he was trying to hurt me in any way, keeping my mother away from me. They also told me that she was a cheater, so it's kind of ridiculous of me to trust her about my dad being a bad guy right from the beginning. Apparently, his anger issues only got worse after she cheated on him and left him. And since then, he became a different guy and they blamed her for it. But the bottom line is, if I decide to forgive my mother, I'll be insulting my father in a way that cannot be taken back. So they told me that if I ended up accepting my mother back into my life, they'd be cutting me out of the family just like my grandpa cut his brother and even my dad's cousin off for the affair, because they don't want anybody with any association with my mom in the family. And right now, I'm in a total dilemma because even though my family isn't very functional or even good to me, it's all I have. Besides, they're not completely wrong about my dad developing his anger issues only after my mom left, because before the divorce, I do remember a lot of fights. But I also remember having a lot of good times with my parents. And I also know that in spite of his anger issues, my dad did his best to provide me with everything and financially secure my future. I mean, the guy has left everything to me in his will. So that's gotta count for something regardless of his bad temper and behavior. I've been thinking about reaching out to my mom, but at the same time, I also feel really guilty about it because of whatever my grandparents said and also because I know that my dad wouldn't like it even though he's not here right now. I feel bad and I feel like I'm betraying him in some capacity. It's ridiculous because he always treated me badly and I've always felt kind of relieved that he was gone now and I can live my life on my own terms, but even that feels like a betrayal. I'm just really lost and confused about everything, so I really need some guidance on this. All sorts of advice are welcome. So AITA for wanting to accept my mom back into my life even though my late father wouldn't like it. Update 1. Hi, thank you so much for all the advice. I decided to talk to my mother and meet up once again because there are a lot of things that we need to discuss, and I don't think I need to feel bad about what I'm doing. After reading the comments and speaking to a couple of friends, I realized that I was allowing my grandparents to gaslight me into actually believing that my father might have been a good parent, and I'm really sorry. I know I shouldn't speak ill of the dead or whatever, but he really wasn't. He made me cry and made me hate my life, so it really doesn't matter if he financially secured my future. Because at the end of the day, it cost me my sanity. Most importantly, he lied and lied about my mom in court and she completely lost any credibility that she had as a mother, and she couldn't even reach out to me for so many years because of him. Yet he constantly made me believe that it was because she didn't want to. I had no idea that she was being prevented from reaching out to me. I thought about it a lot and there's literally no way to forgive it regardless of whatever my grandparents have to say about my mother. They think that she was an incompetent parent and prioritized her affair more than her family, and maybe she did, but I don't think she was as bad as my dad. I don't think anybody can possibly be as bad as him, and leaving everything to me in his will doesn't make up for it. I bet he would have left it to someone else if he even had anyone, but he doesn't. Plus, I'm not entirely sure that it was my mom who made my dad the way he was because like I said, as a child I do remember having a lot of fun with my parents, but then again I don't know what went on behind the scenes. I do remember them fighting a lot, but it's not like I knew everything. And besides, after all the lies that I've been told by my dad's side of the family for so long, I think I'm just gonna take everything they say with a pinch of salt now. Anyway, it's been a week and a couple of days since I made my post, and 3 days back, I invited my mom over for lunch and we had a really nice long talk about everything. I tried to be a little more open this time around and told her a lot of things about my life as well, especially about my time with my father, and I ended up crying because, well, it wasn't exactly pleasant recalling everything, especially the bit where he used to taunt me about my mom leaving me, and I used to believe it without knowing the truth. My mom ended up crying as well. She apologized to me profusely for never reaching out before and said that she should have risked it instead of playing it safe because at least that way I would have been able to testify for myself. But then she had no idea how bad I had it with my father, and she had assumed that I must have been happy if I had made no attempts to contact her even after I grew up a bit. She said that it was stupid on her part and acknowledged the fact that she should have reached out to me long before instead of being scared. But honestly, we're all doing the best that we can, and it's not like I'm the only part of her life that she had to worry about. Apparently, she had really had to struggle with money after the divorce because she already barely had anything of her own. She had to get her parents to help her out financially with the lawyers and everything. And even then, they not only lost custody of me, but also a lot of money. So she had to start from scratch, and it took a lot of hard work. So she couldn't even think about contacting me or trying to fight against my dad at the time before she could establish herself. But even then, after she landed her first job and had saved up even a little bit of money, she went against my dad and lost again. She still didn't let that deter her, and I think that's what matters, that she kept trying. I know that it hasn't been easy for her as well, so I'm ready to cut her some slack for not doing the smart thing and just contacting me when I'm a bit older. It's not like she didn't know how to. She had to wait for me to create social media accounts at some point, and then when I did, she would stalk me for almost every day just to see my face in my profile pictures even though my accounts were private. That's how she somehow managed to find my email ID as well and finally managed to get through to me recently. I also asked her about the whole thing with my dad's cousin because the last time we met, she wasn't really able to elaborate on that since I was still reeling from the shock of learning that I was not even my father's bio son. And to my surprise, she told me that my dad's cousin had dropped her a couple of months after she got divorced. He wasn't happy about having to do it, but apparently his parents had given him an ultimatum. He had fought for the two of them for a really long time, but at the end of the day his parents did not want him to have anything to do with her. Even though my dad and grandparents never spoke to his family after finding out about the affair, they didn't seem to care about it and just didn't want their son to have anything to do with my mother. It's strange because I really can't understand how his family was able to force a full-grown man to cut off my mom, but my mom doesn't seem to care about it anymore. She told me that it had been many years since the breakup, and even though it hurt a lot in the beginning, she has moved on. She's been with a couple of guys in the past, and currently she's been in a long-term relationship for the past 3 years and has been thinking about getting married. We talked about her life and we even discussed the idea of staying together as a family. But I think it's going to take us some more time for that to happen because right now, everything is really recent and raw. We're still just opening up to each other and rebuilding whatever relationship we had. So it's going to take a long time before we can finally call each other family. But it's going well for now. My grandparents have no idea. They haven't even bothered to contact me since the last time we spoke, and I don't think I'm going to be contacting them anytime soon either. I just don't want them in my life, to be very honest, and neither do I want anyone else from my dad's family. Update 2. So it's been 2 weeks since my last update, and my grandparents finally reached out to me to rant at me about the fact I was keeping in touch with my mom. She's been over for lunch and dinner a couple of times in the past 2 weeks, and apparently, my grandparents had decided to contact one of my neighbors when I started ignoring them. And my neighbors must have told them that a middle-aged lady had started visiting me. I'm guessing that's how they had figured out that my mom was in touch with me. They tried calling me several times, but I didn't pick up. So they sent me a message telling me I was disappointing them to no end, and they couldn't believe that I was inviting my mom over into the house that my dad used to stay in, the same house that he left for me. And yet it couldn't remind me to be grateful to him for everything that he had done. They claim that it's an insult to my father's memory for me to invite my mom and be hospitable to her after she had literally cheated on the original owner of that house. I don't even understand what they're getting at, but whatever point they're trying to make, it's a really stupid one, and I didn't even think it was important for me to dignify that with a response. But they didn't stop. They just kept texting me, and I really didn't want to block them because I knew that they would lose their minds and start annoying me even more if I did that. But ultimately, that's what I had to do. I told him not to reach out to me anymore, and then I blocked them last evening, and a couple of hours ago they were at my door demanding to be let in so they could talk to me about my behavior. I didn't even bother to argue with them. I just called the cops because I did not have time for this nonsense. I had invited my mom over for dinner, and I didn't want to be here when she finally arrived. And on top of that, I also had a bunch of job applications to fill out because I didn't want to run out of money. Anyway, when the cops finally showed up, I had them escorted off my property, and I even told them that now that my father was gone and he had legally left everything to me, this was my property whether they liked it or not, and I was going to do whatever I wanted regardless of whether they were happy about it or not. Besides, I'm an adult and I know what's good for me and what isn't, especially after spending a lifetime with my father. I think it's finally time that I stand up for myself and do something. My grandparents were obviously not happy about what I had done, but in front of the cops, there was not much that they could do, so they just had to leave quietly. And then my mom came over for dinner. We had an excellent time, and we have even decided that the next time she visits, she's going to bring her boyfriend with her and introduce us to each other. Update 3. Hey, so it's been 4 months since my last update, and recently my mom and her boyfriend got engaged. And over the past couple of months, we have started rebuilding our relationship. So her boyfriend asked me to help him propose, and I did. I was there. I helped him set up all the cameras and stuff, and now they're engaged. I'm even helping them organize their engagement party. And I'm very happy for both my mom and myself because we have found each other after a really long time. And this time, nobody's going to force us to let each other go. Things have also been good for me on the work front because I applied to the company where my dad used to work, and, coincidentally, I got a paid internship there since a lot of people knew my dad and wanted to give me a chance. So I guess I have to thank him for this favor. But really, I think it's the least he could have done for me. Especially now that my grandparents are contesting the will because I don't think they like the fact that I had called the cops on them the last time that they showed up. This happened a couple of weeks ago, but I don't think I have anything to worry about. It took me a while, but I did manage to get in touch with my dad's lawyers. And when I explained the entire situation to them, they told me that they would take care of it. Knowing what they did with my mom, I don't think I have anything to worry about. I was a bit skeptical about them at first, but my mom told me that they were just doing the job. And in all likelihood, they probably believed whatever my dad used to tell them about her, so it's really not their fault. At the end of the day, they're really good at what they do. So why not?